Welcome to the Hararian Network, where we're connecting people through networking. And for today's video, I'm going to do something a little different and get back to just communicating about something. And what I want to talk about is about virtualization, all right? But before we even get to that, let's take things back to like 10 years ago or so, right? That time I was like a teenager or a young adult basically around that time. So what I have heard and known about from what I've heard was that around that time, let's say that you are working in IT and you're working for a company, and there's going to be a lot of network devices, of course, involved to make sure there's network connectivity, of course, right? And there's also going to be data centers where they're going to be racked up into for these devices. And there's going to be a lot of servers, right? And the reason why you're going to have servers is it's going to give out specific services that the company or business needs for them to do their day-to-day things, right? You know what I mean? So, back 10 years ago, like I was mentioning, the thing is that if let's say that you had, for example, Windows Server. You bought a Windows Server license, right? And after buying the license, what Microsoft usually would recommend would be like, for example, if you get a license, you can only install like one service on each server that has that license. So think about that. Let's say one or even two the most. Two services on a server. So that means if you had to use so many different services, you'd have to buy one server for each purpose for each thing. And think about how many servers you'd be getting, right? That'd be like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And imagine like how big the environment is on top of that. If it's a really big environment, it's going to be a lot. And basically what I'm trying to get to is that let's say if that is set up that way. There's two problems with that. The two problems are this. One problem is that, well, you may not have even enough servers and enough services in the future as things grow and things move on, and you might need another server for another purpose or other servers for other purposes. So that means that you have underutilized resources. And then the other bad thing about this too is that you can have overutilized resources as well too. So that means that you have a lot of servers and a lot of services, but you're not using all of them. Some of them are just on standby. So at the end of the day, that means that you wasted a lot regarding the capital, right? The capital as in the actual cost for the actual servers and things like that, the capital cost. And operational, you're paying a lot too. Think about all those servers, all the heat that those servers are going to generate, and electricity and all that kind of stuff. So for it to operate, you're paying a lot as well too, right? And that's another thing you have to keep in mind. And obviously that's not going to be great for a business or organization. At the end of the day, they want to keep things low cost as best as possible and be as efficient as possible, right? So what I'm trying to get to is that when it's all said and done, virtualization made the whole thing easier, and it was a game changer at the time it came out. Because how virtualization would be is that instead of buying so many servers, what would happen is that you would basically have less amount of servers, and then you would have something upon the servers. It's known as a hypervisor. This hypervisor is what's going to host something called virtual machines. And virtual machines basically are virtual operating systems. Just put it like that. So that means that you have your actual operating system on your physical device, a server, right? And on the server, you have this hypervisor that you can put other operating systems on there. So that means you could put other, let's say, Windows servers. Or if someone uses info blocks to deal with, let's say, like DHCP, giving out IP addresses, or DNS when it comes to name resolution, IPAM for IP address management, and also You can deal with managing multiple servers, multiple DHCP, DNS servers, even Active Directory or like a network policy servers, things like that. So basically, you can have these virtual machines and multiple virtual machines, and each virtual machine has its own purpose. So that's the great thing about virtualization, is that you're not going to have to spend a lot on operational costs because you're going to have less amount of physical servers, and also the capital cost because you have to actually buy those servers to host these things, right? So, and these things as in virtual machines, by the way. So what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, it turned things around and it made things more efficient and more better for businesses, right? And when it comes to virtualization and like the hypervisors and all that stuff, it's not only that you can do it on servers, you can also do it on client devices, laptops, PCs, things like that. But what you're going to see it mostly on is on servers, especially in a business. And I'm going to talk to you in another video about the types of hypervisors for virtualization, by the way, too. And I wanted to mention, though, the thing is also, you got to think about it. With servers, the key component with a server is that you have to make sure you have a great amount of processing, so the CPUs, right? The cores and the sockets, things of that nature. You got to keep in mind about the memory, the RAM, the amount of RAM you have. And also you got to think about the storage that you have on there too. Are you implementing hard drives? Are you implementing solid state drives, right? Things that should come to your mind. And knowing the difference between the two and in which case you're going to implement in your environment, right? So now, another thing I was going to mention is the networking. So the ports on the server, the amount that it could take for the bandwidth and all that kind of stuff. So those are things you have to keep in mind. Those things have to be into play when it comes to the virtualization as well too, because with these virtual machines, they're going to take some of the actual physicals core, right? You need a specific amount of CPU cores and sockets and processing involved for the virtual machines, depending on which type of operating system you're trying to put upon a virtual machine. Like, for example, Windows is going to need more than Linux, let's say, per se, because Linux, you don't need as much. You can actually implement Linux without the GUI, even Windows as well too, but Linux is more so people will do it without the GUI. So then, they can reserve more resources for other virtual machines, let's say, right? And most people just usually do command line with Linux as well too. So these are like things you have to like keep in mind, right? And then the other thing is RAM. So the amount of memory, it's going to take the actual memory of the physical server for your virtual machines as well too. And the storage as well too. It takes some of the storage, whether you have HDD, which is the hard drive disks, whether you have solid state drives, right? And if depending on which one you have, you got to keep in mind with storage, the two components, the two things you should always think about is the capacity and the performance. So with hard drive, as we know, HDDs, it's going to have more capacity usually than solid state drive. But when it comes to performance and caching with the disk and all that kind of stuff, and the input-output operations, the IOs, then solid state drive is going to be better. It has better performance. So you got to find which one suits the best for obviously your environment and your business, right? And the other thing is the networking regarding on the servers. So are you implementing just the twisted pair cables for your networking, for the connections, or are you going to be implementing fiber optics per se, right? Like, these are things that should come to mind within your physical environment when you're implementing the VMs on a hypervisor, so then you can have the virtual machines perform the way you'd want to perform. And I just wanted to show you an example of, let's say, virtualization, and if there's any images of this, actually let me go to images right here and let me type virtualization and see what comes up. So you're going to see right here, let's put this example right here. So just like I was explaining, the one on the left we could focus on. So the whole point is that you have the infrastructure, you have the operating system that's within your infrastructure. So that's like your server, that could be even a client device, and then you have a hypervisor. But depending on which type of hypervisor, which I'll talk about in another video, it depends where the hypervisor could be placed. It could be over, or it could be actually part of the infrastructure, which is kind of giving you a little intro already to the next video. And then from here, you have your virtual machine, right? So you have your operating system, your host operating system. Pardon me, the guest. This is the host right here, my mistake. And then from there, you have all of your, your libraries and stuff of that, and applications that you put on the operating system. So therefore, this is what virtualization is about. I hope you have an understanding of it. And that's all I want to talk to you for today. So for anybody that has been watching my videos, liking, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, I appreciate it. For anyone new that wants to know more and that's interested and like the way I broke things down and gave them a big picture about this, you can subscribe to my channel. I'll give more content such as this, also labbing things up so you can see it from the actual practical example. Right now I just gave you the theory and the big picture of how these things go about. And that's all I want to do for this video. And until next time, take care.